Random House Audio presents the collected short stories of Louis L'Amour, Unabridged Selections from the Frontier Stories, Volume 7, read for you by Jason Culp. West is where the heart is. Jim London lay face down in the dry prairie grass, his body pressed tightly against the ground. Heat, starvation, and exhaustion had taken a toll of his lean, powerful body, and although lightheaded from their accumulative effects, he still grasped the fact that to survive he must not be seen. Hot sun blazed upon his back, and in his nostrils was the stale, sour smell of clothes and body long unwashed. Behind him lay days of dodging Comanche war parties, and sleeping on the bare ground behind rocks or under bushes. He was without weapons or food. It had been 9 hours since he had tasted water, and that was only dew he had licked from leaves. The screams of the dying rang in his ears, amid the sounds of occasional shots and the shouts and war cries of the Indians. From a hill almost 5 miles away, he had spotted the white canvas tops of the Conestoga wagons, and had taken a course that would intercept them. And then, in the last few minutes before he could reach their help, the Comanches had hit the wagon train. From the way the attack went, a number of the Indians must have been bedded down in the tall grass, keeping out of sight. And then, when the train was passing, they sprang for the drivers of the teams. The strategy was perfect, for there was then no chance of the wagon train making its circle. The lead wagons did swing, but 2 other teamsters were dead and another was fighting for his life, and their wagons could not be turned. The 2 lead wagons found themselves isolated from the last 4 and were hit hard by at least 20 Indians. The wagon whose driver was fighting turned over in the tall grass at the edge of a ditch, and the driver was killed. Within 20 minutes after the beginning of the attack, the fighting was over and the wagons looted, and the Indians were riding away, leaving behind them only dead and butchered oxen, the scalped and mutilated bodies of the drivers, and the women who were killed or who had killed themselves. Yet Jim London did not move. This was not his first crossing of the plains or his first encounter with Indians. He had fought Comanches before, as well as Kiowas, Apaches, Sioux, and Cheyenne. Born on the Oregon Trail, he had later been a teamster on the Santa Fe. He knew better than to move now. He knew that an Indian or 2 might come back to look for more loot. The smoke of the burning wagons bit at his nostrils, yet he waited. An hour had passed before he let himself creep forward, and then it was only to inch to the top of the hill, where from behind a tuft of bunch grass he surveyed the scene before him. No living thing stirred near the wagons. Slow tendrils of smoke lifted from blackened timbers and wheel spokes. Bodies lay scattered about, grotesque in attitudes of tortured death. For a long time he studied the scene below and the surrounding hills, and then he crawled over the skyline and slithered downhill through the grass, making no more visible disturbance than a snake or a coyote. Home was still more than 200 miles away, and the wife he had not seen in 4 years would be waiting for him. In his heart, he knew she would be waiting. During the war, the others had scoffed at him. "Why, Jim, you say yourself she don't even know where you're at. She probably figures you're dead. No woman can be expected to wait that long. Not for a man she never hears of, and when she's in a good country for men and a bad one for women." "No," he said stubbornly, "I'll go home. I'll go back to Jane. I come east after some fixings for her, after some stock for the ranch, and I'll go home with what I set out after." "You got any young'uns?" The big sergeant was skeptical. "Nope, I sure ain't, but I wish I did. Only," he added, "maybe I have. Jane, she was expecting, but had a time to go when I left. I only figured to be gone 4 months. And you been gone 4 years? The sergeant shook his head. Forget her, Jim, and come to Mexico with us. Nobody would deny she was a good woman. From what you tell of her, she sure was, but she's been alone and no doubt figures you're dead. She'll be married again, maybe with a family. Jim London had shaken his head. I never took up with no other woman, and Jane wouldn't take up with any other man. I'm going home. He made a good start. He had saved nearly every dime of pay, and he did some shrewd buying and trading when the war was over. He started west with 2 wagons with 6 head of mules to the wagon, knowing the mules would sell better in New Mexico than would oxen. He had 6 cows and a yearling bull, some pigs, chickens, and utensils. He was a proud man when he looked over his outfit, and he hired 2 boys to help him with the extra wagon and the stock. Comanches hit them before they were well started. They killed 2 men and 1 woman and stampeded some stock. The wagon train continued, and at Forks of Little Creek they were hit again, in force this time, and only Jim London came out of it alive. All his outfit was gone, and he escaped without weapons, food, or water. He lay flat in the grass at the edge of the burned spot. Again he studied the hills, and then he eased forward and got to his feet. The nearest wagon was upright, and smoke was still rising from it. The wheels were partly burned, the box badly charred, and the interior smoking. It was still too hot to touch. He crouched near the front wheel and studied the situation, avoiding the bodies. No weapons were in sight, but he had scarcely expected any. There had been 9 wagons. The lead wagons were 30 or 40 yards off, and the 3 wagons whose drivers had been attacked were bunched in the middle, with 1 overturned. The last 4 had burned further than the others. He saw a dead horse lying at one side with a canteen tied to the saddle. He crossed to it at once, and tearing the canteen loose, he rinsed his mouth with water. Gripping himself tight against further drinking, he rinsed his mouth again and moistened his cracked lips. Only then did he let a mere swallow trickle down his parched throat. Resolutely, he put the canteen down in the shade and went through the saddle pockets. It was a treasure trove. He found a good-sized chunk of almost iron-hard brown sugar, a half-dozen biscuits, a chunk of jerky wrapped in paper, and a new plug of chewing tobacco. Putting these things with the canteen, he unfastened the slicker from behind the saddle and added that to the pile. Wagon by wagon, he searched, always alert to the surrounding country and at times leaving the wagons to observe the plain from a hilltop. It was quite dark before he was finished. Then he took his first good drink, for he had allowed himself only nips during the remainder of the day. He took his drink and then ate a biscuit and chewed a piece of the jerky. With his hunting knife, he shaved a little of the plug tobacco and made a cigarette by rolling it in paper, the way the Mexicans did. Every instinct warned him to be away from the place by daylight, and as much as he disliked leaving the bodies as they were, he knew it would be folly to bury them. If the Indians passed that way again, they would find them buried and would immediately be on his trail. Crawling along the edge of the taller grass near the depression where the wagon had tipped over, he stopped suddenly. Here in the ground, near the edge of the grass, was a boot print. His fingers found it, and then felt carefully. It had been made by a running man, either large or heavily laden. Feeling his way along the tracks, London stopped again, for this time his hand had come in contact with a boot. He shook it, but there was no move or response. Crawling nearer, he touched the man's hand. It was cold as marble in the damp night air. Moving his hand again, he struck canvas. Feeling along it, he found it was a long canvas sack. Evidently, the dead man had grabbed this sack from the wagon and dashed for the shelter of the ditch or hollow. Apparently, he had been struck by a bullet and killed, but feeling the body again, London's hand came in contact with a
Sample complete. Ready to continue?